I hope you like this. If you do, give it a thumbs up and leave any comments below. And remember to subscribe to the channel to be kept up to date on all my hypnotic bedtime stories. So I hope you enjoy the story. So as you listen to me and begin to fall asleep, you can allow your eyes to close. And with your eyes closed, listening to me in the background, drifting comfortably asleep. I don't know whether you'll fall asleep faster with the sound of my voice, or whether you'll fall asleep faster with the spaces between my words. But as you comfortably drift off to sleep, I'm just going to tell you a story about a cat. Now this little cat was only a young cat, and this cat was sat on a mat in front of a warm, comfortable fire, and the cat was feeling sleepy, a bit dozy and daydreamy, and the cat was just lying there resting, drifting and dreaming. And the cat was breathing in and breathing out, comfortably breathing in and breathing out, feeling the warmth of the fire. And the cat could feel that mat beneath them, and could hear the fire in the background, and could hear distant sounds of birds and other sounds. And the cat felt so warm and comfortable, just drifting, floating asleep. And as that cat drifted and floated asleep, the cat began to dream. And cats dream, as you know, and the cat began to dream. And as the cat drifted comfortably into a dream, it found itself walking out the back of its house. And the cat knew this area, but something about it looked slightly different in the dream. And the cat was walking out the back of the house, walking through a yard, walking out to a footpath in some countryside that was along the back of the house. And the cat enjoyed walking out along this footpath. And the cat was very used to going out, walking around the perimeter of what it felt was its area, its territory. And the cat would proudly walk around its territory, just surveying everything, seeing what's in its territory. And the cat took its time walking around its perimeter. And this time, in this dream, in this vaguely familiar area that it recognized but didn't recognize at the same time, the cat walked along, enjoying the outside, feeling the way that the air brushed on its fur, feeling the fur moving in the air, feeling that flexibility in the legs when jumping up onto ledges and back down again. And just relaxing, with the muscles relaxed, just walking around. And as the cat continued walking, the cat noticed a barn it didn't recognize. And so the cat walked over towards the barn. The cat was curious, and it walked over towards the barn. And it entered that light and airy barn, and it could see some corn dust in the sunlight that streamed in through a window, dancing in that sunlight. And the cat explored in this barn it had never seen or been in before. And inside this barn, the cat could hear a noise coming from the back of the barn. So the cat walked further into the barn with some curiosity, some wonder and intrigue. And the cat saw a wizard just sitting there on a bale of hay. And the cat knew this was a wizard because of their purple robes. Although they weren't wearing a pointy hat. And the wizard smiled and spoke to the cat. And the cat responded with a meow, and the wizard understood, as if somehow they were talking the same language. And the wizard told the cat that there's a secret in here, a secret that they can discover. And the cat was curious about this. And the wizard held open a palm, and a glowing purple fog appeared above the wizard's hand. And in the fog, the cat could see something. It looked like a 3D movie of them walking through a field. And they watched that 3D movie in the wizard's hand, with that purple fog just floating there around the movie. And they watched themselves in that movie walking through a field of freshly cut corn. And the field was well harvested. And just little bits were sticking out the ground, and the occasional bit of corn would be lying around. And the cat noticed that there was a certain golden glow to this memory. Not only did the field have a certain golden glow, but the sun in this memory on this hand was setting, and so that gave every field and the sky a beautiful golden glow, a soft glow on the eyes. And the cat watched with intrigue as they watched themselves walking through that field, appearing to be so calm, confident and happy. And they kind of recognized the field, but didn't recognize the memory, and they wondered whether it was a hypothetical memory or something that will happen in the future. And the wizard said, "That's up to you." And they walked through that field. And the cat tried to listen really closely because the cat was curious, thinking they should be able to hear some noises, but they couldn't hear any specific noises from that memory. And they saw themselves walking through that field, walking across that field, to the far side of the field. They saw themselves entering a hedgerow, and then coming out the other side of the hedgerow into a different field. Only this field had taller, longer, green grasses that was softer and almost stroked on the fur as it walked past. And the cat watched as they walked through this field, and they wondered where they were going. And they saw how they continued walking until they reached the far side of that field, and there was old farming equipment, all rusted, probably not used in decades. And there was old bits of rubbish left lying around that whoever the farmer was of this area had probably just left some bits out in a corner of this field and had just forgotten about them and never really paid them much attention. And one thing out here was curious. It was an oval mirror, and the cat watched themselves in that memory as they walked up to that oval mirror. And they saw how that them in the memory went to brush itself against the them in the mirror. And they thought that's the kind of thing they'd probably do to test, to see if it's a reflection or another cat. And also to leave a bit of scent to say, I've been here. This is my area. And they noticed how that them in the memory went to brush against the them in the mirror, and instead ended up passing through the mirror, finding themselves on the other side. And they continued to follow this memory, wondering what would happen next. And they saw that everything was reversed in this memory, the other side of this mirror, as if somehow the mirror created a reverse land. Everything looked pretty much the same as it did before they passed through the mirror. Even the mirror looked pretty much the same. Except everything was pointing in the opposite direction, and they now found themselves, having just walked in a straight line, to be walking back towards home. And so they walked through the tall green fields. Then they walked through the hedgerow. And they carried on walking and exploring, and there was something different about the sounds of the birds here. There was something different as they walked across the ploughed and harvested field. There was something different here, and they couldn't quite figure out what. And they admired the colour of the sky, of the golden sky, of how everything seemed very golden still, of the way the sky was gradually getting slightly bluer, as the golden sky and the golden environment seemed to be just gradually fading. And they carried on walking across this field. And as they were watching this, they knew that this was about the point heading in the other direction, that they had come into this memory, so they were curious what would happen next. And they watched as that them carried on going across that field. Worked its way all the way back to its home and settled down in front of the fire. And there was something strange about the sound of the fire, and they couldn't quite figure out what. And then a clock in the property started dinging, and they knew it must be on an hour. And the ding sounded strange, and they couldn't figure out quite what. And this got the cat's attention, that everything seemed slightly strange and they couldn't work it out. And then they saw the person who lived here back up into the room and sit down and put their feet up onto a stool. And pick up a folded newspaper, unfold it, and start reading in the middle of the paper. And then they saw them read the page before that, and then the page before that. And the cat thought to themselves that this is what you see people do when they read the sports pages. They seem to start at the back and work forward. But this isn't what this person's doing. They're starting from the middle and working forward. And then they realized, in this memory, after passing through the mirror, everything's happening in reverse. And then they noticed that they recognized something about this memory. It wasn't so much that it was something they'd experienced, more something they'd thought before. About change, about wanting things to be they were once before. About the future. About how today's tomorrow's yesterday's today. And they watched this memory play out. And they saw themselves going all the way back to becoming a kitten, and the fun they had as a kitten, when they didn't have worries, didn't have their mind thinking about lots of different things that weren't real and hadn't happened. They were just in the moment, playing. They watched how they used to get great pleasure from jumping into empty boxes. They watched how they used to get great pleasure just chasing a bit of string. Whereas now they're aware that if there's an empty box, they just look at it. If there's some string, they just look at it. And they suddenly realised from watching this memory that there was something they could learn. They didn't realise they were going to learn this. And they watched themselves enjoying life as a kitten. And then suddenly the memory became very still and started moving the other way again. And they watched themselves growing up. Only this time they noticed that that kitten's self was holding on to something, holding on to an idea. And they watched how that kitten self was more active, more playful, as they started growing up. They were aware watching this that they'd always held on to curiosity and wonder and the idea of exploration. But they were aware watching this that they had lost something along the way. And so they watched that kitten growing up. And then they watched that kitten as an adult leave that house and walk back across those fields. And they watched as the kitten, this time round, now has grown up, has become an adult, and yet holds on to some of its kitten-like qualities. And instead of just walking in a straight line across the field, it was jumping on the crunchy ground. It was playing with the corn. It was darting around and chasing its tail. And seemed to be having so much more fun. And when it reached the hedgerow, instead of just walking through the hedgerow, it jumped up, got its claws out, and managed to scrabble up on top of the hedge, and carefully walked its way along the hedge, looking around, seeing what it could see, before deciding to jump down into that long, green grassy field. And then it was running through the grasses, darting all over the place, hearing a noise, and it would run towards it. Then it would jump up in the air to try and jump higher than the grass, before landing again. And then it would run after another noise, jump in the air, get its bearings, and then land again. Then it would hear a noise, and it would crouch down and sneak very quietly, sneaking quietly through that grass. And then when it saw a bird, it didn't want to harm the bird, but it wanted to play with the bird. And it would see the bird and it would try and creep up as quietly and carefully and slowly as it could, before wriggling its bum and launching at the bird in a playful way as the bird would fly out the way. And this cat appeared to be having so much fun. And then the cat reached the far end of that field, found that mirror. Only this time it didn't just brush up against the mirror. It walked slowly up towards the mirror, watching itself. And then it darted around the side of the mirror, behind the mirror. And then it carefully peered its head back around to the front again to look in the mirror and see if that cat was still there. And then it jumped out in front of the mirror again and saw the cat in the mirror. And then it darted behind the mirror again. And then it jumped up on the top of the back of the mirror, clawed its way over the top and poked its head down over the top of the mirror, looking into the mirror to see if the cat was there again. And that cat seemed so much more playful, before it eventually walked through the mirror and started walking across the field. And as it was walking across the field going home, it was almost skipping and dancing as the sun was setting. And as it got into the harvested field, the cat stopped to gaze up at the moon and appreciate the moon as the sun was setting, and could see the first stars and planets in the sky. And the cat slowly walked its way home, clearly with a sense of appreciation and wonder and curiosity, but a more childlike, a more kitten-like curiosity. And then as that cat arrived home, so the purple fog in the wizard's hands enveloped the image that was there and then just disappeared. And the fog just spread out from the hands until there was no fog left in the hands. And the cat was just looking into the empty hands of the wizard. And the cat remained staring at those empty hands for a little while, almost in hypnosis, before then gazing up at the wizard's face, seeing the wizard smiling. And then the wizard lowered his hands beside him, and told the cat, "You can be who you want to be. You can lead the life you decide to lead. You're in control of you and who you are and who you will become." And the cat intuitively and deeply understood this. And a little smile came across the cat's face as the cat stood up. And as the cat stood up, so the wizard began to fade in a puff of purple smoke. And the cat walked away from where the wizard was sitting and turned and looked back and saw just an empty barn. But the cat knew what it had seen as it took its time to walk out of the barn and walk along that path, finding its way home. And the cat noticed that instinctively it was walking with a bit of a skip. That it had obviously learned and internalized something as it walked home. and jumped up on the wall, looked around its area before dropping down into the garden, then walking in the yard, and walking back into the house. And once in the house, the cat went back in front of that fire, sat down in front of that fire, rested down, could feel the warmth from the fire on its fur. As the cat drifted asleep, and then as the cat drifted asleep, so the cat moved a little bit, opened its eyes a little bit, realised it had just been having a dream, but felt it as a profound dream, closed its eyes again, knew that things had changed inside, and drifted comfortably and deeply asleep.